Welcome back to MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things magic. It is EDH Commander Thursday, and in today's video we take one last look at Lazav Dimir Mastermind as we talk about some of the high points of the deck post-revision. What's up, MTGBC? That is the MTG Burgeoning community. Here we are with our last look at Lazav Dimir Mastermind and our Dimir Mill build. Now, when last we spoke about this particular commander, we were talking about some major revisions that we needed to do in order to protect ourselves and strengthen the deck from the arch enemy eyes of our opponents. And in so doing, we turned over a fifth of the deck. And here we are to report back to let you know how those revisions went. If you missed any of the previous installments of this deck building series, you can click on the links in the description below to bring you right up to speed. So, pre-revision, we were 2-13 in 15 games. Yeah, so we definitely needed to do something. Post-revision, 7-8 in 15 games, and it was pretty much the same feel for each game. It turned into me versus whoever was sitting at the table. I'll take a 5-game improvement over turning over a fifth of the deck, and I wanted to let the burgeoning community know what some of the highest hitters, some of the grand slams were with the deck. The first card, very unassuming if it gets out there early, but let the game go longer and longer and it turns into a massive problem. Altar of the Brood does so much work for nothing. This is an artifact that only costs 1. So turn 1 play, this is fantastic to just sneak out there, let it collect some dust, and then ping a little here and ping a little there. 1 permanent comes into play. Maybe we play 2. Then they mill 1 card, mill 2. Before you know it, we're 7, 8, 9 turns into the game, and they've already milled 10, 15 cards. Unassumingly, Altar of the Brood does so much work for such little investment. If anyone is out there trying to build a mill EDH deck, and I am proof that it can happen, I am proof that you can be successful with it. As long as you can construct your deck in such a way to protect yourself as the archenemy, you can do it too. Include Altar of the Brood. Card number 1. Awesome card for this kind of a deck. Next card, I have nothing but fabulous positivity to talk about. Maddening Cacophony. Now, I'm going to tell you, I never cast this for its 1 and blue mana value. This was always held in my hand to hit as a kicker, and I always wanted to save it for when Lazav was in play. Him having hexproof is just wonderful. He just can't be sniped in response to playing a spell like Maddening Cacophony. When we kick this for 4 and 2 blue, each of our opponents mill half their library, you're going to find something amazing for Lazav to turn into every single time. I never missed kicking Maddening Cacophony. I cannot speak to only paying the 1 and a blue for each opponent to mill 8 cards. I can't comment on that because I never cast it for that. I always wanted to kick it for half the library, and I never, ever whiffed. Maddening Cacophony is amazing in this mill deck. All right, next card up that going in, I had some reservations about, but every time I got it in play and every time it stayed in play, it just does so much work. Consuming Aberration. 3 blue and a black. Its power and toughness are equal to the number of cards in our opponent's graveyards, and let's be honest, there's going to be a lot of cards in those graveyards. And whenever we cast a spell, each opponent, it's not target opponent, each opponent reveals cards from the top of their library until they reveal a land card, then puts all of those cards into the graveyard. This is it's a non-stop mill machine. You get Consuming Aberration out there, and if we're fortunate enough to protect it with the Lightning Greaves or with some other form of protection like the Commander's Plate, and it just sits there and we cast our spells. It's so unassuming, similar to what Altar of the Brood is. Now, granted, it's a creature, so there's a lot of ways to get rid of it. It's a huge creature, too. It doesn't have any evasion, so there's no trample or flying or anything like that, no land walk abilities. So, I mean, it's a creature. It's easy to deal with, but if it's out there and if it can stay out there, it does so much mill work. It is a great card. Very happy that that's in the deck. Another unassuming card that we included just for what it did, and then after casting it a few times, I'm like, man, this card is sweet. This card is freaking awesome. Extract from Darkness. 3 blue and a black, and each player mills 2 cards, and then we put a creature card from any graveyard onto the battlefield under our control. That's just amazing. No, there's no limitations. There's no other additional things that we have to cast or cost. I don't recall ever losing anything overly valuable from the 2 cards that we milled from our own library, because this is not a self-mill themed deck. We're trying to stay away from that because we value the cards in our hands and not being put into the graveyard. They do nothing for Lazav. So when this first went in, I thought to myself, I don't know about this. And then after playing it and just handpick any creature card from any graveyard, it could be the Consuming Aberration back into play. It could be one of our opponents. Extract from Darkness did a lot of great work in the times it came out. It was a very good card. Very, very good. Now I'm going to show a couple. This is going to be something else. Should I save this for the end? Yeah, let's save that one for the end. All right, so for the revision, for the cards that went in during the last video when we revised, when we turned over like a fifth of the deck, and a lot of it was, not a lot of it, but there was a good chunk of it that went to, taking care of the mana, making sure that that was okay. So when we did that, I wanted to make sure that we kept a close eye on some of the non-mana cards that went into the deck as a way in which to show the community that we made the right choice in upgrading those specific cards. And here they are. Here were the 3 standouts from the gameplay after the revisions. Avatar of Woe was just a force. I never cast her for 6 and 2 black. She was 2 black all day long, and I never attacked with her. I just held her up to destroy any creature that came into play that I could. Any opponent that cast a creature, I just wait till the opponents took their turn around the table, and then I just turned Avatar of Woe sideways, picked off whichever creature I wanted to go into the graveyard, particularly if I had Lazav in play. It got to the point where, with the combo of having Lazav and the Avatar of Woe, my opponents stopped casting creatures. That wins us the game, folks, because we'll just mill and have Lazav come and turn into anything we want. Avatar of Woe was awesome, particularly when paired with Lazav on the battlefield. We could not lose that matchup. It was just awesome. Next up, and this was the card that replaced Mind Funeral. Now, Mind Funeral was 1 blue and a black, and target opponent revealed cards from the top of their library until they revealed 4 land cards, then put all of those cards into the graveyard. So the card that replaced that was Fractured Sanity. So for triple blue, each opponent mills 14 cards. Now, for 1 Mind Funeral to catch 14 cards on any opponent, they have to show a land every 3 cards. Something like every 2.5 to 3 cards they have to show a land. Here, it's just a straight 14. The mana value is the same, although it's triple blue and not 1 blue and a black. We're still investing 3 mana. However, after fixing the mana with all of the lands that we put in and the lands we took out, was never a problem. Absolutely was never a problem. When we were ready to cast Lazav in those 15 games, I think there were 2 or 3 times that after 4 turns, we didn't have the right mana. That is beautiful. I have absolutely no problem with that. That's a great statistic that can just, lend towards the idea of getting mana screwed. But Fractured Sanity did such a better job of what Mind Funeral could do. 14 cards for each opponent. I never even cycled it. Never even did it. Just kept it in my hand to mill those 14 cards. With 3 opponents, that was 42 cards. I'm going to find something good for Lazav. It's going to happen. All right, let's put that one right here. And the last standout, I don't really need to say much about this guy. He was the last to be included in the revisions, and Bruvak the Grandiloquent. I mean, come on. 2 and a blue, he's 1 and 4. If an opponent mills one or more cards, they mill twice that many. I unfortunately did not have the combo where I had Bruvac in play with a Kick, Maddening Cacophony. I'm waiting to do that, because once I can, then that's game, as long as they don't have a shuffle effect like one of the Eldrazi Titans or a Blightsteel Colossus. But I have yet to hit the Bruvac and Maddening Cacophony combo. So good. Just so good. If you're making a mill deck, and you should, because you can do it in EDH, I'm telling you right now, Bruvac must go in. All right, this is it. This is the last subset of cards here we're going to talk about, and it was because of the engine that was created. Now, before we get to the one piece of the engine, I am going to put the 2 up for everybody to see. Now, this is a deck that I actually have a kitchen table version of. It is a Rakdos Mindcrank deck, and it also features Bloodchief Ascension. And what the purposes of this combo is the first thing we're going to do is we want to have the Bloodchief Ascension. We want to get that online. So the Bloodchief Ascension is an enchantment for 1 black, and at the beginning of each end step, if an opponent lost 2 or more life this turn, we put a quest counter on this. And then as long as we have, 3, as long as Bloodchief Ascension has 3 or more quest counters on it, whenever an opponent is whenever an opponent, oh geez, too many of these videos, whenever a card is put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, if this has 3 or more quest counters on it, I may have that player lose 2 life, which we will, and then we gain 2 life. So if we can get the Bloodchief Ascension to 3 or more quest counters to get it online, and then we pair it with the Mindcrank. The Mindcrank is an artifact for 2. Whenever an opponent loses life, that player puts that many cards from the top of his or her library into his or her graveyard. So what we have here is we have a way in which, with an online Bloodchief Ascension, we can mill out an opponent infinitely when paired with Mindcrank. How that works is we deal any 1 point of damage, or we have a card go to an opponent's graveyard. Via milling, via destroying a permanent, via discarding, whatever. Either an opponent is going to lose life by attacking or in any other way, or we're going to have a card go to their graveyard. If the card goes to the graveyard, the Bloodchief Ascension kicks in. The Bloodchief Ascension will have that player lose 2 life, and then Mindcrank will kick in, and whenever an opponent loses 2 life, that player puts that many cards. They're going to lose 2 life. Mindcrank puts 2 cards from their library into their graveyard, which triggers Bloodchief Ascension 2 more times, which then triggers Mindcrank more, and then they go back and forth until the player is out of life, out of cards, and out of time. That is a combination that can happen. It did not happen in this deck. In any of the times that I was playing post-revision or even pre-revision, I did not have the opportunity to Mindcrank anyone with a Bloodchief Ascension online. It can happen. Like I said, I have a kitchen table deck that focuses just on this combo. But this is something to think of as a potential win condition. Just getting it online and having the Mindcrank in play, all I got to do is have them lose a life or get a card into the graveyard. Bloodchief Ascension and Mindcrank. However, what did work out extremely well in the absence of an online Bloodchief Ascension with Mindcrank in play, oh, you guys are going to love this. Sir Conrad the Grim, 3 and double black for a 5/4, okay? Whenever another creature dies, or a creature card is put into a graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield, or a creature card leaves your graveyard, Sir Conrad the Grim deals 1 damage to each opponent. And of course it has the built-in mill feature for 1 and a black. Each player puts the top card of their library into their graveyard. So there were multiple instances during the post-revision games that I had Sir Conrad the Grim in play with Mindcrank. And what was happening is I was milling. I was either utilizing Sir Conrad the Grim's self-mill, which I did multiple times, and then if that wasn't working, then if I had any mill spells in my hand, I would use those too. And then when those were exhausted, I would, use his self-mill ability. So what was happening is, as these cards were getting milled, they were hitting the graveyard, they were triggering Mindcrank, which made him do it again to get more damage dealt by Sir Conrad the Grim. So it went like this. So if I had each player put the top card of their library into their graveyard, and I have 3 opponents, I don't have a creature that hits. Each one of my opponents each had a creature hit the graveyard from one activation of Sir Conrad. They each take 3 points of damage. Mind Crank triggers. They each lost 3 points of damage, or they each lost 3 points of life, so they put the top 3 cards of their library into the graveyard. Any more creatures come into the lot, they put the top 3 cards of their library into the graveyard. If any of those 3 cards were creatures, they triggered Sir Conrad the Grim again, dealing 1 point of damage to each opponent again. So there were 9 cards that went, and then it was just getting out of control. I was unable to have that go infinite, not to the point where it was unstoppable, but it didn't go all the way to killing an opponent. But this worked. This was an amazing engine where I didn't have to invest much into it. I didn't even have to protect the creature. Eventually they would die, because everything dies in Magic, you know that. But just being able to do this and have the Mind Crank just kind of churning through the deck, putting more cards in, more creature cards, Sir Conrad triggering that, dealing the damage to each opponent, then making them mill more cards, all in the shadow of Lazav up there, just looking for another creature to become. And I'll tell you, folks, it was aces. It really was. All right. That does it. MTG Burgeoning Community. You selected quite an interesting commander up there in the Lazav Dimir Mastermind. And I like to think we've come full circle. We installed the deck, we tested it out, we revised it, we came back, and yes, you can make an EDH Commander mill deck, and you can make it quite well. And this is an example of that, folks. Thank you, Burgeoning Community. Great suggestions, great series, great deck. This is MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things Magic.